Onstage, Onstage with Jim and Tom. 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 Tom and Jim.
Tonight we welcome Lee Vandeveer and her band to the stage of the Phoenix Theater. Lee's personal story is one of joy, sorrow, and resistance, and her songs are a reflection of that. Tonight we'll talk about the love, the longing, the loss, and the resurrection that Lee has channeled into this project, and later she and the band will play a set of music. Please welcome to the program, Lee Vandeveer Band.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
All right, here's my thesis statement.
Okay.
Beyond the intro. I feel that an artist's work is a product of their lived experience, and yours is such an example of that. I think all the the pain and the isolation and the redemption of your story really sets the stage for what people are going to watch later on when they watch this music. If you're comfortable, could you tell us some of your story?
Where do you want to start? I'm good at telling it from, first I was born.
Yeah.
No.
I would skip past the childhood parts where everything seemed fine.
There was not a time when everything seemed fine. That's the trick.
Okay, that's interesting. That makes you unique because a lot of people, the first couple years are nice. We're just, we're young. We don't know.
Right.
But not Lee.
Not Lee.
See, this is new. I know
sadly.
I know I think I would guess what I know is teenage Lee onward.
Right.
Right. Yeah, whatever you want to share.
I was really, I think it was first recognized that I was a little extra sad. I was 9 and I had a psychosomatic illness, and you look back and you know more. I know more. I look back and I know more just from my own mental health journey. And I look back and I can actually see some triggers that would have caused a child to have a psychosomatic illness that may not be actually an organic illness. That maybe, the layers and layers and layers of small traumas or big ones results in what we also often call, mental illness as an organic, something you were born with that, something's wrong with you. And that may be true. But I also think that I can point to some significant things that a person like me, which is a person who is very open, very, now I use the word hyper empath because I learned about that through somebody I studied, and I would most certainly call myself a hyper empath, and everybody in my band's a hyper empath. And that's the people that kind of knew from really early on that it was a little harder, emotionally or something. I think there's a lot of that. I think as we grow, we learn to live in society and we learn to not even deal with that. And artists either have to, or somehow it seems like we have to. And so it seems like we have to have this journey, this long journey of mental health, some of us. And my story is that. It's a long journey of mental health. And art has always been a piece of that, and most especially music. But I was 9 years old when I had my first diagnosis of a mental illness. And then I think I was in my 20s when I was diagnosed bipolar. And they were never really addressed in a way that we might address them today. I'm 52, so this is, 30 years ago. And it was good, but it was just oh, you're bipolar. But we didn't do a lot of problem solving. And then I just kind of lived life, but I changed jobs a lot, and it was clear that I was just kind of this up and down person, creative, but, not really, couldn't put it together. Then when I was, I think 40, I really lost it. I was a school teacher and I was not able.
Can we come back to that in a minute? So when you talk about a psychosomatic incident when you were 9, what is that? What's the difference between that and another sort of?
My arm, I was unable to move my arm, but there was nothing wrong with my arm. And so it was really in my head. And so it was a physical manifestation of me shutting down in some way. I had my grandmother died right around that time, and she lived with us, and so she was like a second mom, and so there was some things. There was some things in my life that were, like everybody has trauma, everybody, and I was just sensitive, really sensitive.
And the point you made about, being an artist and like having to feel and like, but conversely, you were forced to live in the society, which causes you kind of need to get numb to some of the bad stuff in order just to exist.
Right.
I always think about like when we walk by, a person who's living on the streets, who's obviously having an incredibly tough time,
right.
and how we just are trained living in society to not feel one way or the other about it because we're walking to where we're going.
And it, yeah, absolutely. And that's so true. We're so trained to walk by. We're trained to willfully not only be silent, but willfully ignorant. We have to stay willfully ignorant of why that person's on the street. And we have to stay willfully silent. First of all, because we can't, what are we going to do? Quit our jobs and join? Like I volunteer at the homeless shelter once a week. Okay, so you can either stop and work in nonprofit and do that work on the streets and be there and be for that people, or you have to go get a job or two or three, and you have to willfully be ignorant we do. And so for artists, so you have somebody who's on the street, and I'm by on the street, I want to be clear. I mean somebody who doesn't want to be sheltered because the shelter can be a very unsafe place. The street is safer. They don't have enough money to actually have a house, or they have just enough money for food, but not enough money for a house. There's a whole bunch of reasons people are on the street. And then the people that are actually mentally ill, whose families and the society does not have a way to figure out how to shelter them. I feel like that could be me. Like it could be me really quickly. My mental health has been in the past so unstable that I find that to be shockingly close. And I think that when I identify myself as an artist, I feel like part of that, what we call crazy, I'm going to call it crazy because I am diagnosed, so I get to say the C word. But I'm crazy. And so I have to figure out how to channel that. And we don't offer we just don't have a good way. And even if we do, we think we do, we have the microaggressions that we hear from anybody who has less privilege than the people with the most privilege. So that would be, first of all, white women second, then the list goes on of where your line of privilege might be. And for artists, like even if you're a white cisgendered male, if you have a mental illness, you're also secretly in this other category. Now you can pass, but you're also in an unheard. You're in a part of the society that is unheard. And I'm losing my train of thought, but
well, I think
pull me back.
Yeah, well, I have a couple thoughts. I mean, number one, it's like to get a bipolar diagnosis 20 years ago was, I think, a lot tougher than it would be to get one now. But you don't think so?
No, that's the opposite was true. Because now, like my bipolar, sometimes I do think. I mean, I do.
I'm sorry. Just to clarify,
Sorry.
I wasn't entirely clear. What I mean is, like, I feel like there is more awareness and empathy for a person who struggles with that now than there was 30 years ago.
Not one bit.
You disagree?
The amount of psychiatrists I've gone in to see for. By the way, I suffer from mental illness. They just put a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah.
Like they literally say, okay, so you feel this way, so let's try this pill. Okay, so that pill doesn't work, so let's try another pill. Oh, that one gives you nausea, so let's give you a pill for nausea. And before you know it, you have, all these pills that don't do anything. I mean, you think of a gash. Like let's say you got stabbed in the gut. Like that's, to me, what mental illness feels like every day is I just have this gut stab and I'm bleeding out.
And my second part was just going to be that it's still impossible to live with that. I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
that it's easier to live with that.
No.
I feel like, my experience is different than yours.
Yeah.
Obviously. I feel like there is more awareness about it now, and
Well,
there
okay.
are more
Yeah.
people talking about it, which are positive things, but that doesn't mean living with it is easier. And that
No.
was going to be the
Yeah.
second part of it. It's like,
Yeah.
even if there is more awareness and people are having the conversations more, it's still very difficult.
Well, and that's right, because it's tricky, because what Bailey's saying is actually, it's very correct, and what you're saying is spot on. The problem is that I don't think we might be talking about it, but we're actually not listening to people who have it. So I've gone to the first doctor was just like, oh, you feel up and down? I think you're bipolar. And that was literally it. Like, it was just not like anything other than I was moody. And I was also like kind of just out of being a teenager, and just like, I was moody, and maybe I was on my period that week. Like, I don't know. So he recognized something, but we didn't have a long conversation, and there was nothing. It was just, I was on lithium the next day. End of story. So was that the right drug? Was it not? I don't know. I could go. But the thing is it's kind of like, the pool is huge, and there's all these people that go into to psychology or psychiatry for whatever reason. And then there's some that work really great, and then there's some that are not. And when somebody who's mental ill starts saying, hey, you guys are hurting us, they go, oh, you're crazy. I think you need another shot of this. Instead of going, okay, what's making you react like this? Like, what is it? And it's that we're talking about it more, and we're squashing it more.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we're talking about it more in the culture, but we're also actually harming more. You have more of a chance of having. So if you get diagnosed with bipolar, I think I have the statistic right, and I think I do. You have a better chance of killing yourself than you do of getting breast cancer and a diagnosis and actually dying of breast cancer. So of course, immediately people say, "Oh, but that's you killing yourself." So you're not really dying of that disease. Yeah, you are, because there is nothing scarier on the planet than feeling like your brain needs to die. And it's not you going, I think I'm just going to kill myself. It's not. And so to treat it like it's not a cancer, and that it doesn't, and that it's not, doesn't take more lives.
Well, and the fact that most of prescriptions that they put on, I'm going to call them Band-Aids, can cause suicidal ideation to begin with.
Right.
So it's like,
and that was
what's the point?
Yeah, and that was my whole thing, is every single in fact, now I realize that it's not only just the pharmaceutical drugs that were given to me for mental illness. Now I'm realizing it's like everything. So I have a severe reaction to the drugs, and it says if you have suicidal ideation on any of these drugs, stop. I just recently read, like, if that happens more than 3 times, don't do any more, because it means they kind of all do. Well, so I'm taking every drug, every single, like you name it, I was on it. Seroquel, the ones that were the hardest to get off. Seroquel was the hardest to get off, like shaving it with a razor blade, because it's like worse than heroin. Like just like this for a year. Like, it's awful.
And now this is in your 20s. 30s?
No. This is just in my 40s.
Oh, in your 40s.
This is my
okay.
40s, and horrible drugs. And the thing is I know that it's risk benefit. I know that if it makes 50,000 people feel great and only kills 5 of us, then 50,000 people are great, but 5 of us are dead. And okay, that's business. That's risk benefit. But we need to also include that in the cultural conversation. So yes, we want to talk about bipolar, and I'm thrilled it's being talked about more. But I also want to talk about how many people are still dying of suicide, and how many people are on medication doing that, and how many people are on off medication doing that. What alternatives? Like, there's a much bigger conversation. And for me, the medication one was huge, because I literally was dying from medication. And a friend of mine said, I think you should try weed. She's like, I've been smoking since I was 15, and I'm pretty sure I would have gone down the same route that you went down, which was institutionalizations, shock therapy, and mind-altering drugs that made me turn into a non-creative zombie, sad, scared, awful. So recently, I haven't been on these drugs for a long time because I traded for cannabis in wake and bake. And I was transformed. I think I started using cannabis at 46 or 47, traded all those drugs in. Now I'm 52. I was literally able to pull my life back into me and do that. And that wasn't the only tool, but for sure, it's a really interesting thing, mental illness, because we don't listen to people who have it enough.
Yeah, and so I feel like you're very purposeful in what you try to do, not only with the music, but just with your time on this planet. And so I do. And I think, we'll talk about the belief system you have about being an artist in a little bit, because that's central to the music. But also, coming on here and talking about mental health seems like a purposeful decision.
Yeah.
And I think you are doing the sort of work that is good in terms of hey, I'm a person who you see on a stage and I struggle with this. And I think the more people that do that, the better. The problem is that societally, and I think this is where we overlap, it's great that she's doing this. Part one. But then, okay, somebody says, yeah, I have an issue as well that I need to get some help with.
Right.
Societally, we don't have the mechanisms in play, and that's where it's not better. And I guess my thing is not suffering with it the way that you folks do. Do we have an idea as to what we could do better as a society?
Yeah, we have to shift the entire paradigm.
No capitalism. The medical industry makes billions of dollars off of people like us because they can prescribe us medication. It's like, it doesn't.
But it does help some people.
No, and it helps me. I'm on a low dose of medication. I understand, but it's just just the trials and tribulations to get to that point. It's just I don't want to go through it ever again.
Yeah.
Well, my thoughts on this subject are, it seems like usually how they try and have people recover seems to be conducive with what they want the public to do. So if they wanted the public to be healthier, how people would be treated would change. But they just want people to be able to go to work in the morning. And so that's
back
that
to the grind.
works. That pretty much that does what they want it to do, but that's not what most, I won't say most, but I just, my experience, I share a similar kind of crazy that Lee does. And so my experience has been that if you kind of just want to shut down what you experience and just kind of go do, the mundane routine of life, most of the time I think Western medicine would work for that. If you do just want to, if thinking is a little too difficult, if life is just too hard, and you just, instead of trying to learn like a functional, instead of making it personal, it's just, get back in the routine, stick to what our society expects of you. And
which doesn't factor in a project like this.
Exactly. It doesn't factor into being an artist for the most part.
Yeah.
If you can afford it.
Yeah.
Exactly, because what we can do, all of us, is I couldn't have worked it today. I'm purposeful with my time, and my time has been spent pretty much in the bed crying for 2 days because I suffer from serious depression. So, but the thing we can do is pull it together for a couple of hours, or play guitar all day, or sing. And if you can, figure out a way to live a life that affords you the ability to do your art, which is probably why lots of people are on the street, because this is almost impossible to do because there's no money. You can really have some healing. You can really heal if you are able to be an artist or whatever you are. Like if you have a mental illness and you also are creative, which I think everybody is, all you have to do is start doing something. And if it comes from your soul, then you're doing it. And I think that if people struggle with anything and they start doing any kind of art, it's healing. And that's why we're able to actually do this, because I don't think, I couldn't, I'm disabled. I am disabled as a school teacher. I can't pull it together. Somehow, some way, I'm able to write a song in the middle of the night and pull it together to do this. But this is it. And people are like, oh, this is great. I'm like, yeah, okay, it's so hard. it's it looks shiny and bright to be an artist, but really it's about soothing your soul.
We actually, we're conditioned to watch our artists and understand that actually it's not shiny and bright now. There's such a history. I keep flashing back to Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe, some of the greats that I grew up watching, and absolutely they were eaten up by their mental illness and the way society just did not plug into that. Yeah. And it looks shiny and bright for the moment, but it's not.
It's a burden.
Yeah, and we have been watching as a society, and still I think we're clueless as to what to do.
Yeah.
And that's an issue.
You said, I think you started with what do we do? And I think, and something you said reminded me of a lyric in one of my songs, and it's Maya Angelou's, why the cage birds, I know why the cage bird sings. So she wrote that in 1970. Yeah. And still I did not see. So here's, we culturally, some of us are screaming about something and we don't see it. And then we do. We're like, oh shit, I read that book. How did I not see that? But how did we not know that how do we not know that all these artists that kill themselves all the time?
That would be the willful ignorance.
You're right.
Yeah.
And I don't want to probe too deeply on the hugely traumatic stuff. I appreciate that.
Right.
So it's always like whatever you're comfortable sharing. But yours is a story of redemption despite the pain that you live with still. Yeah. Because in your 40s, you did have the incident that happened where you had been teaching. It was a life that you quite liked.
I loved it.
And it was a life that you thought you would do until you were 90.
Exactly.
And then something happened. And I know kind of the broad strokes, but anything you want to share about that? Because, to see you here performing the songs that you perform, you're right. People would see that and be like, there's a person that's got it together. There's a person that hasn't suffered major setbacks. But, you sit at the other side of this table as somebody who, just biographically has gone through some of the toughest stuff that we've heard. To hear that you, were subjected to electroshock therapy is
chose it.
Yeah.
As a full-grown adult.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I'm curious.
And subjected both.
Yeah. So like that's a thing. that's a major trauma. And
it is a major
anything
trauma.
that you want to share about that section of your life, I think is interesting.
I think that's good. First of all, I want to just quickly, along the way, like I'm a learner. And so I was always gathering tools, and in my family, there was one of the earliest things I was able to do as far as mental health was 12-step program as a not as an addict but as a family member, and that probably was like that was the concrete layer for my mental health. So, and I never stopped. I kept reading everything I could get my hands on, and I didn't stay with the 12-step except for the 10th step, which is, if you don't know what the 10th step is, it's continue to take personal inventory, and when wrong, promptly admit it. And for me, there's also in 12-step, it's take what you like and leave the rest. And that was the thing. So take what you like and leave the rest. And the 10th step are what, those are the core pieces of my mental health. So fast forward to 40, and I have this and I know this, but I lose it. And I lose it partly because, I'm super hypersensitive. So anything anybody's saying to me, I have to really support myself by keeping people who are in my closest proximity really aware of my mental illness and how I need to be interacted with. I didn't know that at 40. I just boundaryless, kind of open, raw. And I was teaching high school. I was teaching high school art. And, you're in a high school setting, that's a huge amount of vulnerable people with suicide, with sex, with drugs, with pregnancies, with everything. And I was really, really good at it because I have a mental illness and I can handle that. But I wasn't protecting myself. I didn't know what I was taking on or what I was doing or how intense it was until I just would have to take these long breaks and I would be in bed, like depressed in bed, like can't get up and joints hurt and headache and can't get out of bed. And then it was like, oh, wait, weren't you diagnosed bipolar? And then start to go to the doctors and, try to find out what's going on in a very panicked like way, partly because, I'm suicidal at this point. Well, then the medicine immediately started making me more suicidal, and then I would calm down and then be suicidal again, then change drugs and more suicide. Like it's just this constant battle of suicidal ideation with every drug, and then it would settle. And then the only time I made through 1 year, I think I made it through 1 year at Montgomery High School, is because I was on an ADD drug. And one of the doctors all along the way said, all these things, bipolar, schizophrenia, all these things that you have, it's also part of an ADD diagnosis. So if you take care of the ADD first, you might not have to deal with all that other stuff. I didn't listen to him. I just couldn't I was already too far into the depression and all that stuff to be able to hear him say battle with the ADD first. So in 2017, just after the fire, I read the ADD book for the first time cover to cover. I was like, oh shit.
And what is the ADD?
It was just an ADD book that I had, for my kid was diagnosed ADD, and so I had a book and I hadn't really read it. I'd thumbed through. I thought I knew. I was a teacher. I got this. I know. I didn't know. So I read that book cover to cover in 2017, right after the fires. 2017, right after the fires, and I called that doctor. And I was like, I don't know if you remember me, but I just want to make sure I would. And he said, I don't really remember. I could go get my files, but I definitely know that I would have told you that. He said, you would have come in with presenting as bipolar, and I would have said, check the ADD. And so I did. I started working on the ADD more.
What were the broad stroke takeaways of reading that book? Because you included that in the email to me in advance about how that was a transformative moment for you.
Yeah. Well, one of the major things was I was diagnosed with rapid cycling bipolar because because I rapid cycle, but I don't rapid cycle bipolar. I have ADD the rapid cycling that I have is absolutely by the book ADD. It doesn't have anything to do with what rapid cycling...
could you explain what rapid cycling is?
Yeah, it means going from one mood to the other very quickly. And in ADD, one of the things from what I've read is that the rapid cycling could be in a day. You might have a mood swing from furious anger, and you see this in kids, they're just furious, and they have a rage response, and it's blah, and then it's over, and then they're happy again, and then they might have another one, but it's really rapid, and it could be in the course of a day or over a few days. Bipolar rapid cycling is more like a week on, a week off, or something like that's not that quick, and so it was like, oh, I'm not a rapid cycler. I'm a depressive. Like when my bipolar hits, it means I'm in bed. Like can't function, can't move, can't think, underwater, can't move. So when I left teaching, it was because I just couldn't. It would be 6 months. I'd be off, and then I'd be off. And finally, they were like, look, what do you think? And I didn't want to quit. and I didn't want to stop, but it was kind of, I had a union, and they're like, we have something for you. There's a avenue for this. And I want to interject because I'm a lot of my stuff is social justice oriented, and I want to make sure that it's clear that part of the reason that was, available to me is because I'm a highly educated white woman, and I know that I was suffering, and I know that I had something wrong, and I was able to articulate that in a way to people, and they believed me. But if I were a woman of color, or a man, or anybody of color, that would have been extremely difficult. And it's part of the reason why I work at the homeless shelter, is because I want to make sure I recognize that a lot of the people I know did not have that luxury, and it was partly because of, education and skin color. Yeah.
So that was the end of the Montgomery High School chapter,
right?
And then I assume, based on what you just said, then that you said, all right, well, let's like really dive into this and see what we can do.
Yeah.
And then I believe you got a diagnosis which kind of threw you for a loop or something. Didn't they? Was it in your 40s that they did like the formal diagnosis, and that's sort of in your mind closed off some avenues? Or I don't know. I seem to remember like you felt like you could not teach again because. Well,
I could teach. Yeah. When it happened, like I knew, like I was in a depression and I couldn't go back, and I couldn't, and then I got I have a pension. I have a disability pension, which is not enough to live here on, by the way, but it's that's what I mean. It's like I might be that homeless person. Like I could be just enough money to live on the street and have a good van and be able to also be a musician, but not enough to actually really live in the home that I raised, in the place where I raised my children. Like I'd have to move, anyway. So I dove because it was so shocking. I really did dive into my own mental health. I thought maybe I would sub a little bit. I tried. It just didn't, I just wasn't able to really pull it together, and I couldn't do anything other than to dive into myself. So I painted. I was a painter. Excuse me. I was a painter, and that's why I taught art in high school. And I tried to paint, but music was actually what was really deep inside me. And during the time, I basically dove into myself, and I read so much about my mental illness and found so much help by myself that I kind of, I have a master's degree in education. So basically I got a master's degree in mental health. And I just gave it to myself in my basement.
When did you get your master's degree?
I got it in 2013, maybe.
Okay, so recently.
Oh yeah, I was. In fact, I was literally having a serious mental health crisis when I defended my dissertation, or my thesis, and literally it's driving. Either I'm going to drive to the ER or drive to the thesis, and I thought I can pull this together for 2 hours, and I did. And then I went back home and was back in crisis.
So this is such an interesting last 7 years, because music was not a huge part of your life. It was something you wanted to do when you were younger, but you went the art path instead. And what you wrote to me was that the way that it manifested was that like the chaos of your mind would take you down too many paths at once.
Yeah.
And though music was something you wanted to do as a child,
right,
you didn't do it because you just felt overwhelmed. And
right,
you're like, well, I'm going to do the art one instead.
Right.
And
kind of, yeah. But now, hindsight's 2020. That was described in that ADD book. So basically I read that ADD book and I was like, oh my God, that's my life. And so when I was young and I think I was 20, had a band called 20 Days. And we only played like one show. And I loved it, and I really loved it. And I was like a backup singer in a band, and also, I had a little, right around that time, I also had a Me Too crisis. I didn't know that at the time. I was 20, and it was fairly consensual. Back in the day, it was totally consensual, but I did get a grade from that person. And now I look back on it and I was like, oh, so I can see why you would quit everything and not realize why you quit everything. And, so yeah, I wanted to do that. And between the ADD and traumatic things, I just was like, looking all over the place, like a million, there's a gazillion hamsters in wheels up in my brain. And I don't know if I even picked art. It was that I don't know. I think my mom said degree in art history, and I was like, okay.
And so the thesis, what was that on? Because I feel like the topic there kind of plays into everything we're talking about.
I think it does, because when I was teaching, the main thing was trying to elicit critical thinking. And so I wanted to teach people how to reflect on their own art and themselves. And so I created a classroom. I did like a half an hour. I made people do a drawing. Like, you have to draw this microphone. I'll teach you how. And see, you can teach people how to do anything. I can teach you how to play chords, but I can't teach you to be Bob Dylan. I can't teach you to want to be Bob Dylan. So I would just let people make their stuff, whatever it was. And then I would have them do the self-critique. And it was that part. It was, I wanted to elicit critical thinking. And so we didn't really make art as much as thought about why we were making art, thought about what the art was, what emotion, all the things that go into why we do something. So my thesis was about eliciting critical thinking through high school studio art classes, visual arts.
And you love to teach, right? And you talk about how you were fascinated by the different ways that people learned. I mean, why? Why did you find that process so interesting?
Probably because I have a mental illness, and I'm always trying to check out how people's brains work.
Do you feel like mental illness has caused your empathy to be more developed than it would be otherwise?
I think that my mental illness is indicative of being a hyper empath means I can feel more, and I think empathy is learned. I one of the most healing people during that time when I was 45 and I was teaching myself. There's a lot of people, but most notably Carla McLaren. She wrote a book called The Language of Emotion, and basically what she says is, she talks about trauma and how we all have it, and she discloses her personal trauma that's pretty hardcore, and then she talks about being a hyper empath as a child and talking to animals and talking, and I'm like, oh, I get that. And then she talks about learning about emotions, and she talks about that we have our emotions. There's no good or bad emotions, and I think pop culture and pop society and everything that's super popular psychology wise talks about, shame, anger, bad, you don't want to be shamed, no fear, no shame, no anger, all these things. And Carla McLaren invites us to really have a good relationship with all those things, because shame, in her words, is that's what stops you. That's your societal's, that's the gift that you if you feel that means don't do that again. It's and then you say sorry and you don't. But if shamelessness is not something you want. You want some shame. We want shame enough to, not hurt each other. And we want anger enough to not, to say, hey, no, don't come near me. There's no bad emotion. And learning about that was completely shifting for me. And in in learning about that, I was able to, I guess all of the things were able, everything opened up better because instead of having a negative relationship with my emotions and my mental health and feeling like all the things that most normal people say about all these emotions, she offered something completely different. And that shifted everything.
Yeah, because you were told that your brain could not be fixed by current methods. That was a quote that you said to me in the email. And so here we are. I mean, 2013 was when that thesis happened. And in that year, you didn't have this band, right?
Mm-mm.
No.
We didn't have, so the mental health thing happened and I was going to paint and I was in the basement just learning about mental health, learning about just how to do things differently. And I all of a sudden, there was a song in my head and I just sang it to myself. And I don't play an instrument, so I just sang it to myself. And so I contacted a friend who is also a local musician, Allison Harris, and I went to her for voice lessons. I said, I've always wanted to sing. And then I showed her the song, and she's like, wait, this is a great song. And she's like, if this is your first one, and it was her dad who actually said, oh, that happens sometimes. That's not her first song. She's been doing this for 20 years, because he was counting my painting history, that just because I was changing medium. He was like, this is a song, but it's just a different medium. You've been an artist all along. So yeah, then Allison gave me permission to call Chip Lee Trombley.
Chip,
and
seated to my left.
Yes, and Chip, who is I had met as he was a drummer in a band that I was friends with, and amazing. And Allison gave me basically permission to call him after I had gotten some chops with a really good friend, Alex Moore, who basically came into my basement and played what I was singing until I got permission from my teacher to call Chip.
And you were not comfortable sharing this with your family?
Oh, the first song I didn't, and the reason is because I have a pretty hard relationship with my family, and we're estranged right now, and that's okay. Sometimes a boundary. I've learned in the last couple of years that sometimes you can love people if you have a strong boundary up, and that maybe you don't see them. I didn't tell them because I'm a verbal processor, and I think that's exhausting for people. And it most certainly was for my family. So for me to bring yet a new thing, a new idea to them, somehow my brain knew that this needed to be a secret. Like this had to be mine. And I couldn't have any judgment or any talk about it. I couldn't have any, oh, you should, or what do you, oh my goodness. I had to have it my secret.
It would have been like pouring bleach on the soil.
Perhaps, yeah, exactly. And innocently.
No disrespect to them.
Totally.
With no ill intent, but there's just sometimes these things need to grow unfettered without any other input.
Have they hurt you since then?
Yeah, they did. And I did, as soon as I got brave enough to show them after a while. It didn't take long, because I'm still the verbal processor that needs to throw up everything. So, it didn't take long before I showed them, and they were very supportive and very kind and very helpful. It was very, they were. We did the first house concert at my parents' house, and it was great. Yeah.
And I think all of this has led to what you feel your duty as an artist is, and this is where I think everybody can chime in if you want to. There's no pressure. Mm-hmm. But you wrote to me that you feel it's your duty as an artist to break open your soul, and that by doing so, you help other people do the same. And I think that's a really beautiful sentiment, and anything that you wanted to expand on there, I think would be great, because I think that right there is essentially why you keep doing what you do with this, aside from the healing components.
Yeah. I do. It's weird, and sometimes I feel like, is it my ego? Like, I don't know what it is. One of my heroes, a songwriting hero, Tim Bloom, actually said, I have to take this very seriously. I'm taking this, and I thought, maybe I should take it seriously. And then that's when I started thinking, that's what Tim's words did for me. That's when lots of people's words have done for me, is they broke open their soul, and then I got to be riding my bike or in the shower, and I got to break open my soul because they made the path in my brain through their music or their lyrics for me to go deeper. And that's, Chip has said often, it's been a life raft. And that's what it was for me. Those lyrics were a life raft. And so if I go ahead and take myself seriously, then I can say, well, maybe they're a life raft. Maybe I'm writing my own life raft, But yeah, I think that's.
And before the show, you said to me, because we were talking about society and we were talking about mental health and how it affects artists, et cetera. You were talking about how, without your struggle, you don't get this music.
That's right.
And how unkind you think, we talked about this already, but how unkind you think the world is to its artists.
Yeah.
Because we so appreciate the music culturally. Like we love music.
Right.
This is a 7 billion strong world membership that loves music. But then at the same time, if somebody is difficult that makes the music, it's like, get the fuck out of here,
Exactly.
And so we as a society, that's kind of like a constant push and pull.
Right.
You kind of said that earlier. Is there anything else to say on that?
Yeah, I think that's it. It's like, I think that it is, I got in trouble once. I said, we're hated. And, someone said, oh, well, we're not hated. I'm like, yeah, we are. We're absolutely hated by society. We're too scary. We're too loud. We're too emotional. We're too much. We're too much. And that's why if you're too much, you need a medicine. You need something to calm yourself down because you're too much. And definitely, we're not compensated. We're not compensated until we become outrageously successful. And so the four of us have to do this work, because really we do. We have to do this work. And
I'd love to chime in.
Yeah.
Why I resonate with why we have to do this is because often as an artist, what I've seen from my influences has been that they're often cultural whistleblowers that are calling out the status quo, and it's not making for a functioning society. It's keeping people oppressed, and it's keeping the people who have the privilege to make change busy. And then people like us come along and say, think about it. Just think about it. Like, come listen to us, and we'll do a lot of the thinking for you and arrange it in a way that's very often easy to accept. Sometimes not. Sometimes it could be more abstract, and then then it becomes a challenge of, as an art, how we get to abstract something in a way that makes it more meaningful and makes the point come across even more clearly. But it comes back to when Lee says, artists are hated. It's because I think sometimes it really shows that we're whistleblowers. We're looking at society and we're looking at people and saying, based on our experiences, we're saying, this is how we felt, this is what we see. And if other people happen to relate and it's something that's not, it might not be like an accepted idea, but it's just, we kind of try to turn people on to thinking more. And it's like in your thesis, just we're inciting critical thinking by making it pleasant in a way to think about some things that if you were just talking to somebody, or if somebody, they wouldn't be pleasant if you were sitting with, trying to talk to your parents about your issues and your personal struggles from wherever you are. It's a lot easier to kind of put it in a box that people want to open and look at it themselves. And so that's kind of always been my feeling is, a lot of the people that tend to not be able to have full long careers, it's often because it seems like their message was too powerful and too specific. A lot of people who find great success these days have kind of a broader, less intense message. It's more of just, they can portray a feeling and people can relate to that feeling, but it's not inciting that critical thinking. And that's kind of the mainstream as I experience it.
Yeah, they don't want to be too scary.
Right.
Yeah.
I think if you didn't have a strain of like social justice messaging, you would perhaps feel less hated.
Yes.
I think if your songs were all just love songs,
It's true.
then
Yeah.
people would have less reason to hate you. But then for some of the stuff that you just said,
Yeah.
that's where, that's why they're always like, keep the politics out of the music. But
and
it's
I think too, like hip hop, I mean, that's a big, there's a lot of talk in the classic hip hop community of what happens to a lot of these rappers that meet an untimely demise. And, there's hours of conspiracy theories. And I mean, a movie just came out about, I think it was Tupac, right? Like it's on Netflix. I mean, so it's like in the mainstream, people are starting to challenge, like, what are people who were speaking really intense messages and also coincidentally happen to not see the end of their careers? People are trying to connect dots that, in the mainstream media, they don't line up because it's not portrayed that way. It's portrayed as, one factor, one small issue in their life,
Cause them to get shot or somehow overdose on drugs or whatever it is.
To be specific about it, exactly.
Yeah.
you said that it wasn't until recently that you feel like you found yourself and accepted yourself as an artist.
Yeah.
What led to that? Because, I mean, you mentioned that you're 52.
Yeah.
This is a life of art.
Yeah.
And for it to be a recent, development that you're like, yes, I am this and I feel like I can do this. That's a profound thing.
I think it partly happened because I actually, right after the fire in 2017, we were working, Chip and I were doing the duo. Bailey was in and out bass. He was been out of the country, but Chip and I were doing the duo. And the fire broke out, and I saw an ad at Chimera, and Dana Woodman, I think it's Woodman, at Chimera said...
What is Chimera?
Chimera is a maker space in Sebastopol. Basically said, if you have a laptop, come down here right now. And I was frantic. I didn't know what to do. I was in a new apartment by myself. Frantic. I went down there, and I was basically a new singer. And one of the guys down there said, oh, you're a verbal processor. Oh, and he accepted that I was talking too much. I was processing too fast. My mouth was moving too fast. And when he accepted that in me, something made me start accepting myself. And something, Chip showing up and working with me, Bailey showing up, working with me, and then Ryan later. But really, all of a sudden, I was recognizing that people I really respected musically keep showing up. So I started respecting myself and taking myself seriously by other people. Like, it just started reflecting. I just started seeing it. I started seeing what, okay. And then Tim Bloom from the Mother Hips, I heard an interview or I don't know where, but he said that, taking it seriously. And then I just trusted and believed. And then all of a sudden, 80% of the time I can believe it. Maybe 75, but a good over 50% of the time.
Better than 49.
Totally.
We're over 50.
Anything over 50, I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you've talked about how, obviously mental illness is something that you discuss a lot in your songwriting, but also social justice. And I'm curious, like, how do you address that? It's a tricky needle to thread.
Kinda, except for songs just kind of right in my head, kind of themselves. So I'm always connected, like I'm always dealing with social justice stuff. I'm always reading or looking or asking or uncovering or, trying to learn more. And so whatever I'm thinking about in that moment or like I'm tuned into, it will often write itself in my head in a song. So then
Is it always a call to action?
it's almost always a call to action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you feel in this era of your songwriting is the thing that is most pressing?
It's pretty much, I mean, basically it's just two things. It's the environment and social justice. And for me, social justice is pretty much anything that deals with people of color, anything, mental illness, people of color, all the politics. I had, like, when we wrote Child in a Cage, I sang, like, I have a song called Child in a Cage.
It's on our EP, actually. Schoolhouse Sessions.
Yeah, it's on our EP. And I just was listening or reading about, what we're doing at the border and realizing we've been doing it for a long time and this is not necessarily new and what's going on and basically it's a call to action. Where's our mother rage? Where's our father rage? And then I always, there's always other stuff in there, like plastic bags in the sea, pretending it's not me. And it's like, that's me. That's me recognizing that I am the one who's putting plastic in the sea. Like, it's not somebody else. It's absolutely not somebody else. It's me. And so it's my call to action myself, and it's all for all of us to be. I have an organization called Face the Waste. It's an art. I do a little art, and it's the same. It's face myself first, and face it first.
What kind of art is it?
Trash art.
I wanted you to. It's recycled. It's
right.
repurposed.
Right. Well,
I think that's important.
Well, it is,
because that both takes care of the message, and also, it's not just telling somebody, "Hey, this is what's going on." They literally can see it's for real. It's so real now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And so obviously you see the ugly things in our world, and these can affect your mental health. So it has this just sort of ugly.
And I can't help but notice as you see it, it pulls you right into step 10.
It does. It every time.
Yeah, every time.
Every time. I have to do that. Like, take personal inventory. What am I doing? So if I'm writing a song, my Me Too song. It was for Tarana Burke, who started Me Too in 2009, which was a lot earlier than anybody found out about it. And then it was quickly co-opted and taken, this beautiful, and it's still beautiful. So this beautiful woman who started this beautiful organization, she's a woman of color, and it was predominantly people of color. And then all of a sudden, nobody knows who she is. I mean, I'm like, you set the stage. I say, you set the stage, you made it safe for me. Me meaning all white women. The lyric is, you have every reason to distrust me. Shards of mirror from sea to shining sea. That's me looking in the mirror and then letting it break and not really looking. You set the stage, made it safe for me. And my question is, why don't I see your eyes on the cover of Time magazine? Why wasn't Tarana Burke on the cover of Time magazine for the Me Too? Why wasn't it just her face? It wasn't. It was a bunch of people, including some beautiful white women. And that's fine. Okay, great. But no, it's not fine. She did this. She helped all of us. And some people are like, well, she hurts. Yeah, okay. This is risk benefit. She opened up for 90% of these people, men and women, to be able to have that conversation, and then 10% of the people who may have abused it or whatever. So, of course, media is going to focus on the 10% of people who are wrong,
and media is going to focus on men.
And and
no matter what,
right? And so that's a huge one for me. Like, and then if the song goes on about social, it goes on and on.
Yeah. call to action. I mean,
Call to action.
It's all call to action.
It's all, and it's calling me to action first. And it's like, I'm also a witch, and there's a thing in witchcraft. You don't mess with stuff unless you know you're clean. Like you gotta, if you're gonna set some intentions and do some heavy thinking on something, you want to make sure that your soul is clean. So if I write this song, it's kind of a spell or a magic. It's magic. It's like here are these words, this magic, and I'm calling you out. I'm calling me out and I'm calling you out. But I already made sure that everything in here that I can answer to. I can answer to. Yeah, I ignored women 30 years ago that I was working with who were people of color saying, you need to be listening to me. And I'm like, oh, no, I am. And I was not. And so I know that. And that's why I feel safe in writing that song. Because if I get called out, I can say, yeah, I know. I know that I ignored so many people screaming because that's why I wrote the song. And I know that 2 years from now, I'll probably be writing more about what I didn't see today. Because I'm constantly being awakened to stuff that I had no idea was happening around me. Willful ignorance of my surroundings.
And I think as we sort of kind of wind down a bit, you made a great point to me earlier about social permaculture.
Oh, yeah.
And you even have a song that kind of relates to this. Could you make that point again now with the mics rolling? Because I thought it was a really beautiful thing. And I think when you step back from the really heavy stuff, the mental illness stuff, the social justice stuff, what you do with this project also plays a role with this observation about social permaculture.
Right.
Yeah. So anything you want to share there?
Well, social permaculture basically comes from permaculture, which is a combination of permanent and agriculture, and it's a design system. And it's basically it's a kind of a new way of doing the old ancient way that would be taking care of the land based on the way Native American people or Native people from all over the world would have, or the sensibilities that they've passed down, then combined with people who want to be doing design. So it's a kind of a modern and ancient blend. And so in social permaculture, it'd be using those same principles and applying them to a collaborative setting. And it's trying to get the setting away from a hierarchical structure and into collaborative structures. And so in doing that, we can set up systems that don't resemble, a teacher and a classroom, or a parent and a student, or a boss but rather groups that can interact.
And how does your song relate to that concept?
I'm not sure if I have a song about
Groundswell.
Groundswell,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you. I didn't remember what the title was, but I remember there was a song.
Yeah.
Right.
Ripples over ripples, roots all entwined. Ground's been swelling over time. Something like that.
It ain't too late.
Yeah.
That's my line.
Don't give up without a fight.
Yeah.
I love these
Those
guys.
are all
Ain't too late.
Okay, so I just want to, first of all, I've been talking the whole time, and that's fine, because, it's my band, and I'm mental health, all these things. But these guys, this is what it feels like to be, a woman, a white woman who has a lot of privilege and a lot of ability, who's also broken, to be supported by these three shockingly good musicians is, and for them to just whip out my lyrics when I couldn't even remember my own, what song it was.
Lucky it's a song we all sing in.
It makes me realize that, just to really remember, I'm really guilty of painting things with a wide brush and saying, and there's no men and there's no women, and there's a lot of truth to that, but there's a lot of truth to we get a lot of support and a lot.
Well, let's
of
analyze
love.
Groundswell, because I think it fits
That's
contextually.
So now that I've gotten a little teary-eyed over you guys, Groundswell is they say it ain't too late, and I say don't give up without a fight. And basically my song is about this cultural thing has been happening underground. Like it's there. There's people like, oh, we need to do something about the homelessness, or it's there. It's right there.
The passion is there.
Ground's been swelling all this time. There's, for everything you think you want to do, there's already a bunch of people doing it. All you have to do is go volunteer. The ground has been swelling all this time. It's just that there's been social justice movements for generations, and it's just our turn to join them. Not reinvent the wheel, not, we don't have to do anything. We just have to figure out a way. And we just have to, it's our turn.
I can't think of a better way to wind down the episode than on that point. And, Lee, you sharing the story of your life. I mean, your art is your life and your life is your art. But for you to sit down and just like in detail share it, I think is a really generous thing. And like I was saying to you before the show, it's like one of the reasons I wanted to have you on so much is that when we talked about having you on, your story is incredibly unique, and not everybody is comfortable coming on here and bearing their soul.
Yeah.
And so thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. You're welcome. And thanks to my amazing band for letting me talk the whole time.
You're welcome.
And, you doing that helps us understand and appreciate the music that you all collaboratively are going to play together.
Yeah.
And so why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Why don't we wrap
Make
this
some
up
music.
and let's do that. So
Let's hear some tunes.
we've talked, and now in a moment, a set of music by Lee Vandeveer Band is up next. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having us.
Just out for a smoke in between the shows. How come it's always me who should have known? My shirt's too tight and my hair's too fine, and I can move my hips to the bass line. Said I was the angel of West County. Call me sweetie in the alley. And I was both flattered and afraid. Could be a wedding ring, could be a switchblade. The women who seem to have the cure were not versed in the ways of the demure. They were strong enough to say checkmate, still some old boy's gonna set them straight. He said I was the angel of West County. Call me sweetie in the alley. And I was both flattered and afraid. Could be a wedding ring, could be a switchblade. If I take his hand to be enough? Will he demand more? Get mad if I say no? Will I be sneaking out the back door? That we're our grandmother's dreams. But is this just the same old thing? Like a record scratch in the growth ring. Seems we already know what tomorrow brings. Said I was the angel of West County. Call me sweetie in the alley. And I was both flattered and afraid. Could be a wedding ring, could be a switchblade, could be a wedding ring, could be a switchblade. Could be a wedding ring, could be a switchblade. I heard you playing behind some voice on the radio. Every note you played stirred up my soul. When you're coming to town again, I'm feeling like a little sin. Can't stop thinking about you touching my skin. The sun is breaking through dark clouds and I'm caught in a downpour again. Don't you worry, babe, I'm not talking about moving in. If you come on a Monday, you know I'm gonna treat you right. But you gotta stay away come Friday night. You can show up at my door in a week or so. Turn the music on, dance nice and slow. If we only have one sweet day, it's gonna heal us anyway. You can get here soon, meet you halfway. The sun is breaking through dark clouds and I'm caught in a downpour again. Don't you worry, babe, I'm not talking about moving in. If you come on a Monday, you know I'm gonna treat you right. But you gotta stay away come Friday night. Now you're singing sweet, sweet songs from long ago. Warm breeze drifts in, it's time to go. Knew this day would come soon. Put a wager on a blue moon, 'cause it takes too much time to stay in tune. The sun is breaking through dark clouds and I'm caught in a downpour again. Don't you worry, babe, I'm not talking about moving in. If you come on a Monday, you know I'm gonna treat you right. But you gotta stay away come Friday night. stay away come Friday night. Oh yeah, you gotta stay away come Friday night. Almost killed me not being seen. Almost killed me giving up on my dreams. I screamed at the top of my lungs. Some things can't be undone. Did they save my soul? Shook my bones till I was whole. Sing away all they stole. Sing away all they stole. Sing away. Decades of sorrow, still a star shines bright. Standing together with one hell of a fight. Face Medusa turned to stone. Blame her, she should have known. Did they save my soul? Shook my bones till I was whole. Sing away all they stole. Sing away all they stole. Sing away. Hear the ass clinking in a glass of gin. I can feel the gashes in my brain again. Hidden so far inside. Oh, almost stayed on this crazy train ride. Hidden so far inside. Oh, almost stayed on this crazy train ride. Like a snake shedding my skin, trying to understand all that's been. Shoulder to shoulder we stand tall, trade silence for hardball. Did they save my soul? Shook my bones till I was whole. Sing away all they stole. Sing away all they stole. Sing away, sing away, sing away, sing away, sing away, sing away. You and I were caught up in some kind of fantasy, thinking we could walk the shores at night, rolling around in the galaxy. In no time we were swimming by the red tide light. Please take a walk with me on this cold, sharp Northern California sand. Please take a walk with me on this cold, sharp Northern California sand. No one ever sees that kind of wave crashing, the kind that pulls your feet right off the floor. Holding on, trying to keep dreams from smashing, while the icy water chills you to the core. Please take a walk with me on this cold, sharp Northern California sand. Please take a walk with me on this cold, sharp Northern California sand. You know how to swim out of the riptide, so you grab my arm and pull me to the edge. Nowhere left to run and hide. We'll just live here on this ledge.